Welcome to episode 8 of my NHL Trade Talk series, where I have a special guest join me to discuss some hypothetical but fun trade discussions. We'll jump into today's players, including guys from the Flames, Habs, and Leafs, coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, excited for this episode here as well. Episode number 8. We're continuing the NHL Trade Talk series, and I have another very special guest joining me here today. We have Matt from Scotian Canadien channel. It's very much a hockey channel. He's a big Habs fan. Mostly covers Montreal, but does occasionally talk about other parts of hockey as well. But obviously, if you want Habs content especially, that's kind of what he specializes in. So certainly highly recommend you check him out. And of course, like myself and many of the other YouTubers I've had featured in this series, another good Atlantic Canadian guy here. So thanks, Matt, for coming on. I do appreciate it very much. And let's jump into today's pairs of players. Now, I made this a little bit challenging on Matt. I gave him some hard ones, but obviously they're all focused on Canadian teams. We've got players from the Leafs, the Habs, and the Flames. You probably had a pretty good teaser here from the thumbnail and the title as well. So let's jump in with the first one he's going to take a look at is a couple of guys from the Flames. Who will be traded first?
What's going on, guys? First of all, thank you to Top Shelf Hockey for inviting me on to participate in this segment. Now, I've been given 3 different sets of 2 players. Now, in each set, they're from the same team, and I have to pick who is more likely to be traded. So, the first set of 2 from the Calgary Flames, Sean Monahan or Johnny Gaudreau. Then the Leafs, Nylander or Marner. And then from the Habs, we have Drouin or Deneau. Now, I'm a Habs fan. We're going to do the Habs last. And why don't we just start with an easy one? The Calgary Flames. Who is more likely to be traded between Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau? I would say that there is no chance at all that Sean Monahan will be leaving the Calgary Flames anytime soon. He's got a great contract, and he's a very special player. 3 years left at $6.4 million, and he's, especially at the position that he's at center, very responsible two-way center. He's got size, he's got the grit, and he's got the offensive skill, and he can pot some very important goals. Of course, a couple years down the line here, Calgary is going to have to, speak with Monahan's camp and get a long-term extension through his prime so he can stay, because there is no way this Canadian kid is leaving the Calgary Flames. Then you look at Johnny Gaudreau, who there's some rumors that he might not be as happy as he could be right now in Calgary. Maybe there's nothing to it, but who knows? There could be, smoke, there's some fire, right? So, and he struggled last season. So to me, a kid that played his development years in Boston College, an American, maybe he wants to play on one of these big Eastern American teams, the Red Wings, the Rangers, Boston Bruins. I could see that happening, and I could see a couple years from now, or even maybe sooner, the Calgary Flames looking at their roster and maybe adjusting when Johnny Gaudreau is approaching his UFA years. And he's 27 years old. He's 2 years left at $6.8 million, so a decision has to be made sooner rather than later on him. Very special player, though, so he could definitely bring back a lot for the Calgary Flames. The playmaking skill he has is unbelievable. The way he skates and uses edges to get around the zone and just open up those lanes. It's something else, and it's very, very fun to watch. I'm looking forward to, this portion of Gaudreau's career that he has left with the Calgary Flames, especially with the Canadian division coming up. Really hoping to see Monahan and Gaudreau get that absolute fire, unbeatable chemistry going again, and really see Calgary thrive in this new NHL season.
I do have to agree with Matt on this one. I do think Johnny Gaudreau is the more likely player to be moved. He's been circled with trade rumors, seems like forever, a couple of years now. Many figure that by the time his contract's up, if he's not traded, that he will leave as a UFA and end up going back to the eastern part of the United States where he's originally from, whether it be the Devils, the Flyers, or anywhere as close to there. There's a lot of teams in that general vicinity that would certainly have interest to bring him in and that he would be interested in as well. So I do think that he's more likely, given all that, where Monahan's a center, he's more difficult to replace. But I do think that regardless of who goes or when, I do think that the Flames, if they do not have a deep playoff run for the coming season and we don't get that big step forward, that this core group of players, including Monahan and Gaudreau, are going to be broken up and somebody is going to be moved to kind of try something different with a different approach. And Gaudreau is the most likely guy, but I would have to wonder if they might listen on Monahan just because of the value being such a goal-scoring center iceman. But I think Gaudreau is more likely between the two. Now, next up, we're going to send Matt back to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Of course, one of his probably most bitter rivals being a Habs fan, but a couple of key players that I don't expect to be traded now. But if we get deeper into this season and next without seeing some Maple Leaf playoff success, likely could be moved to try and change things up. Who would be more likely between Nylander and Marner?
Let's move on to the Toronto Maple Leafs now here. Now, again, you might think this is an easy one to decide because a lot of talk that the Leafs need to move William Nylander so they can, really fix their decor for the long term. Brian Burke said it, a few other prominent guys have said it. But you know what? I don't think either of these players are being traded from the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I will get in and give you an answer because I have to pick, right? But beforehand, I don't see why you trade William Nylander. He's a very special player. He's got size. He's responsible defensively. He just doesn't have any weaknesses. He can score. He can play make. He's a great skater as well. And he's got the best contract out of the Leafs' top four, superstars. 4 years left at $7 million. Solid contract for sure. Then you look at Marner, okay? Ontario kid, hometown boy. And he's a fantastic player in his own right. We all know this. His playmaking ability is top-notch in the league, probably top 3, if not top 2 or first. The way he plays, the skill in his hands, and how he can just open up the lanes and find his teammates and put that puck on their stick tape to tape, whether it's with sauce or just across the ice. His vision is impeccable. Love Mitch Marner, so I think these are two guys you build around. Nylander, his ability to play center, and then you got Marner. You need a playmaker like that on your team, that elite level. To me, the guys you might have to look at trading, really, should be either Austin Matthews or John Tavares. Because, I say Austin Matthews because there's a legitimate chance he could walk to Arizona by the time he's a UFA 4 or 5 years from now. I would not be surprised. I don't think anyone would be surprised. And then John Tavares. He's in his early 30s. Fantastic player. Very strong center in the NHL. Top 15 at least. Top, maybe top 10. Captain of the Leafs. But, a decline is imminent for him. Mid-30s or so. So if you're really looking long term, I don't think either of these, any of these guys will get traded tomorrow. But to me, the guys you got to pick from is Austin Matthews or John Tavares. And I'll let you guys make that decision. But if I got to pick between Nylander and Marner, I think I'd go with Mitch Marner only because of that contract. 5 years left, $11 million. It's absolutely astronomical. You can argue he's worth it, but still, if I got to pick between these two and seeing what the Leafs would need to do, clearing up that cap space and really, getting a long-term fix on D is why I'd look at trading Marner and keeping Nylander because he plays center and he's got a good contract.
Now, this Leaf scenario is certainly a tough one. It's hard to say. I mean, you could probably make an argument that Nylander's contract's a little bit easier to move, but at the same time, the Marner contract's very front-loaded as well. And, you might get a better return. It really boils down to what they want. I assume if they went down that road of trading either of these guys, they're going to be wanting like a top stud defenseman or a top stud goaltender because we don't know the future of Freddie Anderson really beyond the coming season. He's a pending UFA. So what do they do in that regard? Could they land themselves a top stud younger goaltender? Hard to say. So I think at the end of the day, it really boils down to who they are targeting for a return. But for right now, I'm going to pick Nylander as the more likely just because of the lower amount, easier to trade. But I'm really not sure what direction they would go in if they go down this road after, potentially, if there's any more playoff failures or not. If they start having more playoff success, though, I'd fully suspect that both these guys will be sticking around long term. Now, lastly here, we gave Matt's scenario from his beloved Montreal Canadiens, a couple of players who do, I think, have some uncertainty around their future. But, again, no guarantee either guy gets moved. But that's forwards Jonathan Drouin and Phillip Danault.
Now, move on to the Montreal Canadiens. It would be easy to say, let's just trade Phillip Danault because talk is that Kotkaniemi and Suzuki have passed Danault on the depth chart after what they did in the return to play. And it was incredibly impressive. But you know what? I am not trading Phillip Danault. He's too valuable to this team, and I don't think he has been passed on the depth chart. What we saw from Kotkaniemi and Suzuki impressive nonetheless, but it was a very short sample size, and I'm not so sure either of these two can maintain that over a full 82-game season. Now, we will be going into a 56-game season here, but still, I don't want to base my opinion on these guys on that short sample size. Now, Kotkaniemi had a great rookie year. Suzuki was fantastic for us last season, but he played mostly right wing. Is he ready for that full-time center role? But that's why I see Danault as very useful and huge for the Montreal Canadiens, because he is proven. He puts up respectable points, but he is, getting the talk of being one of the best two-way centers in the league and getting in Selke conversations. Very special player, the way he skates and can keep up with guys, getting sticks in lanes. And he's also an underrated playmaker and the great chemistry with Tatar and Gallagher. So I think if you lock up Danault, easy to say to trade him because he's got 1 year left at 3.1, but I think you lock him up long term, and it would not hurt the Habs because he can mentor the young kids while also taking the big matchups for 2 to 3 years or so. And if at that point Kotkaniemi and Suzuki have truly passed Danault on the depth chart, that's when you look at trading him, and teams would line up for a player like Phillip Danault in a trade. So I definitely think that's what you do. And in this situation where I got to pick between Drouin and Danault, I go Drouin. And I say this because, we've been waiting for him to reach his full potential for a long time now. And he hasn't. And whether that's because, he hasn't been, the lack of consistency, or he hasn't been paired with the right guys, or injury woes, it just hasn't happened. But he's got a ton of skill. He's got a bit of size to him too. And when he wants to be physical, he will be. But he's a very skilled player. But if he doesn't get it going this season, to me, whether I'm picking between these two players or not, he could be the guy on the trade block to clear up that $5.5 million over the next 2 to 3 years, to get Suzuki locked up, to get Kotkaniemi locked up, and then maybe you look at extending Tatar at left wing instead of having Drouin in your long-term plans, because we all know how special Tatar has fit in with Montreal, out of the get. So, yeah, definitely between these two guys, I'm picking Drouin as the guy you trade, because Danault is too valuable to this team, despite how, strong the Montreal Canadiens look down the middle long-term in the future. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed my answers here. Cheers. Thanks again to Top Shelf Hockey for inviting me on to do this segment.
Now, this one's a tough one as well. Personally, the Habs made a lot of moves this got past offseason, so they kind of shored up their blue line a bit. They got a solid backup goaltender, so there's a lot of good things going. So I think if they were to move a forward, they'd probably want another forward back, and obviously that center position is tough. I honestly don't think they'd want to trade Phillip Danault, but it's only going to boil down to if they don't feel they can get him signed would be the only way he gets moved. Ultimately, they have some young centers like Kotkaniemi and Suzuki coming up who, in the playoffs at least, kind of surpassed him and have kind of bumped him down the lineup a bit, which he didn't seem overly thrilled about, and I don't blame him. But at the same time, he might come back this year, be that much more motivated to really push himself, and might show that, it's a little premature to give up those top spots to those guys and take him out of the equation. So clearly, from that scenario, I could see Danault maybe getting a contract extension, but it depends on what he wants. Given their current cap situation where Bergevin has spent more money and just have the younger guys that are going to be coming out of ELCs and needing new deals, they can't spend too much more than what he's making now. So it really boils down to being a cost-benefit analysis. Now, if Jonathan Drouin comes out this season and is again inconsistent like we've seen in the past, I think he would be the more likely one to be traded because of that, but it could also prove to be more difficult to trade, whereas if Phillip Danault became available, I think Danault would get a ton of interest. Therefore, I'm selecting Danault as being the more likely one to be moved, but I don't think it would be the Habs' first choice by any means. Again, thank you very much to Matt from Scotian Canadien for coming on. Always enjoy him coming on. It's, I think, the second time he's been on the channel now, so certainly go check him out, as I mentioned before. We'll see if this series continues, if I can line up some more other hockey channels to come on. We'll continue it. Otherwise, we very well might go in a different direction sometime in the near future and create a new series with a new twist here, so stay tuned for that coming up as well. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you next time.